Hello, this is Dr. Joseph Fair. I am an NBC Science contributor. I am a virologist and epidemiologist, and here to answer any questions you might have on COVID-19 or the coronavirus pandemic. Thank you for everyone for continuing to tune in every week as we have these, and I hope they're informative for you. So we can get started whenever you'd like, starting asking questions, or I could just go straight into kind of where we are in the pandemic. I'll do that while people are starting to log on. And again, I'll start with who I am first. I am a virologist and epidemiologist. I spent my career studying emerging viruses, a lot like the ones that cause COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, Ebola, and Lassa fever, and viruses like that. And spent some time actually working in Wuhan, looking at viruses like this in the markets where this came through. So when will everything open back up? Chris asked. It's really going to be a phased opening back up of everything, Chris. So it's not all going to be at once. Certain things are going to open before other things. Things like restaurants and bars, I expect those to open kind of last at the capacity they were at least before all of this COVID-19 stuff happened. So, you know, places where there's going to be a lot of like intimate social gathering and close contact with one another, we're a really good way away from that. Other places which, you know, maybe not as many people need to be in there at the same time, then that'll open up sooner. Is this a human-made virus? No, it's not. This is a natural-born virus coming from, we think, at least bats. And we think maybe pangolins might be involved in it as well. So a bat to a pangolin to a human, but we're not certain about the pangolin part. But they're very closely related to coronaviruses that we've found in bats. Who am I? I am Joseph Fair. I am a virologist and epidemiologist. What about season ticket holders? I am sorry, season ticket holders. At least for the foreseeable future, those season tickets aren't going to do you much good. Should you be concerned about the 100+ reports out of South Korea? They were infected yet now somehow reactivated or something. I'm concerned about that myself. You know, there's two lines of thought on that. The one line of thought is that the people in South Korea, they tested negative, but they were what we would call false negatives. So they were actually positive, and you know, something that was done in the test, because these tests are really, really sensitive, and if they're not done exactly correct, or if the reagents or the chemicals that they use for them are not stored at the exactly correct temperatures, they can give you what we call false negatives, or they can give you what we call false positives. So we think that these might be false negatives that were, they were actually still positive people. That being said, 100 of them is a lot, and South Korea is a pretty advanced country, so it is concerning that, you know, they got the virus again, or if that's what happened. I'm not quite sure that that's what happened. But again, it's a new virus to science, so we're learning about it as we go. Maybe not everyone is immune to it once they get it. Would it be premature, Ripley asked, would it be premature to end lockdown schools, being virtual now? Would it be better to wait until the finish of the school year? I think it is premature, and I think, you know, it's going to be the next school year before schools open back up. When will testing be available to all? Suzanne asked. I really wish I had an answer to that, and that's going to be really key to stopping this, is having the testing available to all and everywhere across the country and on all of our territories. Will there be a second peak? There will be a second peak, presumably in the fall. You know, we don't really even know if there's going to be a dip, and when we talk about a second peak, we're primarily talking about in the summer we'll see a dip in cases of the cold and flu. And colds are usually caused by either coronaviruses or another virus called rhinoviruses. And then, of course, influenza is a different sort of virus. They usually do have peaks, and there's usually a spring peak and then a fall peak. We really don't know if we're going to see a dip in the summer. And if we do see a dip in the summer, we're presumably going to have a second peak. But, what we can say for certain is that we're going to have cases until the next year. I really don't think this virus is going anywhere before, 2021. Will there be a vaccine available for the elderly and weakened immune system people? The vaccine will be available to everybody when it is available. And there are several candidates right now, at least 4 vaccine candidates, which are at various phases in testing. Some of them are at the phase of actually putting them into people, healthy people, to see how those people react to them, because you put it in healthy people first to see if they have any kind of adverse reaction to them. And then you go out from there. So that takes a lot of time. Other ones of the vaccines are in kind of earlier phases of development. It's going to take them longer to get into people. But the shortest time that you're going to see for a vaccine is anywhere from 12 to 18 months from now from that vaccine actually going into people. Why are people... I think I answered the South Korea one. I hope you saw earlier about South Korea, or heard earlier about South Korea, rather. Is wearing a mask a law now? It's not a law now, but it is highly encouraged, and it's being encouraged because in public, what we're learning about this new virus is that even pre-symptomatic, or people that don't have symptoms yet, or people that don't develop symptoms at all, can transmit large amounts of the virus. And so we think that that's why it's kind of exploding across the nation, is because of that asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic transmission. So the mask is not so much to protect you, but it's to protect you from giving it to others. And it's not a law now, except in certain cities. In certain cities, if you saw the video from Philadelphia, it is a law to wear a mask in certain areas. So it really depends on where you are, but it's not a national law. Why are so many people dying? People are dying for a lot of different reasons. In this country, we lead the world in most of the underlying conditions that are known to be very high risk for COVID-19. Even in our younger groups, there's a lot of diabetes, heart disease, etc. So that has a lot to do with it. But there may be other factors to do with it as well that we're just not clear yet. As I said, this is a new virus to science, so each population has generally had, older people with underlying conditions die from it. I would say, had overwhelmingly that. That being said, we've had a lot of, a significant number at least of younger people die with it with no underlying conditions that we knew of. What are the chances of the virus returning to the U.S. if we open too soon? The chances of the virus coming back if we open too soon are quite high. To be honest, that's a tough question for me to answer, just because you have your economic considerations and then you have your public health considerations. But for public health, ideally we would be shut down for another 4 to 6 to even 8 weeks to get this virus under control. I know that's devastating to a lot of people's lives, so I don't say that lightly. But for this to actually stop and to be slow enough for us to get back to a normal life, I think that's what we're going to have to do nationwide for this to actually slow down and have us allow us a chance for our PPE to catch up, personal protective equipment for the nurses and doctors and frontline workers, as well as the everyone that's going to get them, and the police and everybody else that needs to wear masks, as well as the diagnostic test, and have those diagnostic tests around the country. But that's a long time between then and now. Does everyone have the virus already and our side effects differ from everyone else? No, everyone doesn't have the virus already, but the side effects are, not side effects, but the effects of the virus on everyone is, I would say, pretty diverse. And so a lot of people have, a dry cough. Some people have, sneezing, and some people have fever. One thing that it tends to be a hallmark of this the disease part of this virus is the loss of smell and taste in the absence of any other kind of or any other symptoms rather. And so, there's a huge diversity of symptoms with this virus. That's why you can only diagnose it with the laboratory test. Was it not mutated? No, this isn't. Well, it is a mutated virus. Most viruses are mutated, but this virus is the same one that emerged from Wuhan. It's a close cousin of SARS coronavirus, and fits very closely genetically within the coronavirus family of SARS. And so we know it's a close cousin of SARS and comes from roughly the same area that SARS came from back in 2003. A pangolin is a wild animal. It looks a lot like a, let's see, how should I say, almost like an armadillo with scales on it. So that's what a pangolin is, and it's a wild animal that you find both in Africa and in Asia. Is the peak right now? The peak right now depends on really where you are. In places like New York and in Washington State and in California, where you are seeing a flattening of those curves, those are generally places where they have really stringent social distancing measures in place. Like I was born in Kentucky, they generally seem to be doing pretty good. So some places are doing better than others, and where they have those social distancing measures in place, they're doing better than others. Other places' peaks will be different from then. So, just because New York is hitting its peak right now and it has social distancing measures, if one of those variables changes, New York could go back up, or, Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans, any of the other cities could, their peaks could be going up, which they are right now. Do I think this will come back in the fall? Yes, I think it'll still be here in the fall. I'm not sure that it will even go away in the summer. I think it will maybe decrease somewhat in the summer due to the number of daylight hours and the number of hours we're outside, but I don't think it's going to go away. It was not declared a man-made virus. It's declared an animal virus. Sorry. How long should we continue social distancing? That's probably going to go on for the considerable future. I would say that's probably going to go on until, honestly, at least the fall, and probably well into the fall, and maybe up until, the holidays and beyond. I really doubt that we'll be able to lighten up on the social distancing before that time. We'll see, maybe we'll start seeing this dramatic dip that we hope that we're going to see in the summer, but so far we're not seeing that. Can I talk about the mutation of COVID-19, Sandra asked. COVID-19 is, like I said, it's called SARS-CoV-2 is the virus that causes COVID-19. It's a very close cousin of SARS coronavirus. Right now, there are 3 what they call genetic variants. They're not different strains of the virus, but there are 3 genetic variants, meaning they're very close cousins to one another of SARS-CoV-2 that causes COVID-19. And we're in the primary group of that. It's called the A group that is closely related to the Chinese form of the virus. So there's not much mutation in terms of the virus as far as like how its outcomes on people that we know about at least yet. Sometimes that is a factor in how people have different outcomes. Is it the genetics of the virus? Is it the genetics of the people, or is it both? And a lot of times it's both. Why is it taking so long to get a vaccine? A vaccine takes anywhere from 5 to 20 years on average, at least in the United States. So To do one in a year to 18 months is really record time, and would be the first time in history that we've been able to get one that safe through modern clinical trials. We'll have minimal clinical trials for them, but there will be clinical trials for them, so that takes the longest. That's the part that takes the longest, is getting through clinical trials and making sure you don't hurt anyone. Why are they lifting? When are they lifting the hold for people to return to work? It's really state by state and governor by governor who are making those decisions on when they are lifting the hold to return to work. It's going to be as soon as possible, and it depends on the type of work. If it's a restaurant or a bar, I expect that will take the longest to open back up, or any place where a lot of people are going to congregate or have mass gatherings. So if it's a conference center, any place like that, I think that's going to take the longest to open back up. Whereas businesses where you don't have as many people that need to congregate, or where stores can at least control the amount of traffic of people coming in and adhere to that pretty strictly, then I think you'll have those businesses opening up a little bit sooner. Why are people blaming 5G? I don't know, actually. There's always got to be a lot of conspiracy theorists. There was about this virus, that it was man-made, that it came from a lab in China. I've worked at that laboratory in China and with the scientist who discovered it. There's a lot of people that think it's blamed by, a lot of people associating it with 5G technology. I heard that probably a month ago the first time. And the person, of course, that believed it was very adamant that it was true. But I have no idea why people are blaming 5G technology. But what I can say from a virus and virology standpoint, 5G would have nothing to do with the virus itself or how the virus would affect anything. Oh, I'm not scapegoating bats and pangolins. They get killed enough, and I completely agree with you. So please don't take anything I said about negative against bats or pangolins. It has to do with agricultural and food practices in that region, actually, and they are kept close together in markets, and so bats are absolutely essential for the ecosystem, and they eat around 70% of the world's mosquito population. So you can imagine the world with 70% more mosquitoes. So we really try to protect them in all of the work that we do, and I work with a lot of veterinarians, actually probably mostly veterinarians, in addition to medical doctors, on protecting the wildlife trade, protecting the wildlife species that often get traded in these regions that we work in. So while this came from bats, we're not scapegoating them. When should you see your stimulus check? I'm sorry, I don't know. I think some of them I was reading today are going out this week. I don't know how they prioritize who's getting the checks and when, but I know that I saw that some of them were going out this week. That being said, it would not be the first time that the timelines have changed. I've never seen a nationwide stimulus check go out to everyone, so I'm sure this will take time to get it out to everybody. Do people develop an immunity once they get it? All thoughts are that yes, people do develop an immunity once they get it, but that's not been confirmed yet, and it will take us time to confirm that, and only time will tell us if people that got it can get it again. There's been a number of people reported out of South Korea specifically that have been reported to be reinfected. We're not sure if they had false negative tests or if they actually did get reinfected. So, we'll have to see the data coming out of the United States itself, and we being the scientific community, and look at that data and see if we're seeing the same thing in the U.S. Show us your credentials. I'm sorry, I'm in a corporate rental. I don't have my credentials. I apologize. But I am a virologist and epidemiologist. Thoughts on herd immunity. So herd immunity is a good question. So herd immunity is when the majority of the population has some kind of protective immunity to this pathogen or this virus. And so, if this pathogen or virus, this pathogen or virus, we have no herd immunity to it right now, which is why it's spreading through the human population so quickly, and it is so deadly to us. It can develop over, say, a generation of people getting this infection. So, if this went through 2 to 3 seasons and infected, say, 80% of the world's population, we would have what you would call herd immunity, meaning the majority of us have some kind of immunity to the virus, at least for some period of time. We have no idea when that would be, and this virus, like I said and have said several times, is new to humans, so we'll learn more as time goes on and learn more about the virus, and we're learning a little more about it every day. But in terms of everything from its transmission to how its outcomes, the different people that it's affecting with the disease. That being said, we have no idea if everyone's going to be immune, if only a portion of people are going to be immune, or if there's going to be full immunity period. Why isn't there enough tests done? When is the vaccine going to be available? So the testing, there's just simply not enough of them right now, is my understanding, to go everywhere they need to be. You need certain pieces of equipment to run these tests, so not every laboratory across the nation is equipped with that type of equipment. It's specialized equipment, so they have to buy the equipment, plus they have to buy the diagnostic. And I don't know if they've got the money to do that right now, frankly, and if they do, if they've got the supplier to get the reagents are the chemicals they use in the test. And so right now it's a supply issue, it's not a demand issue. There's a lot of demand, just the supply is not there. It does take time to ramp all that up, just because on a normal production cycle, not that much of it is needed. And there's a lot of things that go along with it to even get it to the testing phase, like the chemicals that go along with it. The vaccine is going to be available. My guess the first time a vaccine is going to be available into humans would be 12 to 18 months from now. Maybe shorter than that, but I think that would really be kind of pushing the timeline if we have a vaccine in 12 to 18 months from now. How long a time can a vaccine give it an immunity? A vaccine, theoretically, one of the best examples is yellow fever, and that's at least 10 years. It's really longer than 10 years, but you have to get a booster every 10 years. So a really great vaccine can last, up to 10 years or even a lifetime. Some vaccines require, boosters every 2 to 3 years. So we have no idea what the lifespan of a potential vaccine for COVID-19 would be, but we hope, for a lifetime. But we'll take what we can get. If it's a booster every 5 years, that would be good as well. Will coronavirus be a seasonal yearly thing? It'll be seasonal for us for at least a couple of years, in my own opinion, and that's just my own opinion. It may be, less than 2 years, but I would give it at least 1.5 years that it will be with us seasonally until we have a vaccine or until we have that herd immunity that I talked about earlier with, roughly 80% of us having some kind of immunity to it. Are schools going to be open back up in the fall? I honestly can't answer that question. I really don't know if they will be or not at this point in time. If we're undergoing a second wave, and if this second wave ends up being like the 1918 influenza, which the second wave was much more deadly than the first, this is not an influenza virus, so there's no necessary reason to say that, but we can't say that it's not going to be, less deadly than the first one. So if we go by historical precedent, that was more deadly, and we have to prepare for something like that. So if that's the case, then I would say the schools won't be open back up. Or if we're in the case where, frankly, the virus, the number of new infections has dropped off really dramatically, and there's a way to do it safely, then, we would open the schools back up early, I would think. Did I say penguins? No, I said pangolins. There will eventually be a vaccine. Yes, I do think that. Do think so. There's 4 or 5 candidates right now, and they all look pretty promising in one way or another. That being said, if they in the comment below, a year is incredibly fast track. That's true. Anywhere from 12 to 18 months will be a record to get a vaccine into humans in the modern day world. Just because usually there's a lot more safety trials that go on with something before you put a vaccine just from laboratory studies into humans. A lot of that is going to either be bypassed or really abridged or shortened for it to happen safely in humans this time, and there's still going to be side effects from that. When will it be safe to fly? I think it's going to be in the general category that I talked about with restaurants and bars. I think it's going to be safe to fly, but I think the flights are going to have to take probably half the people that they normally would to maintain some kind of social distancing, or everybody's going to have to wear a mask on the flight. I think it's probably going to maybe be both of those, and there's going to need to be a disinfecting between flights as a new protocol for airlines. In addition to just cleaning the plane, they're disinfecting the seats and the tables and everything else. I still don't think that's happening across the U.S., and so that would be a good low-cost alternative for them to adopt, and something to keep everybody safe that is low-cost and they could maintain over the long term. What's the U.S. doing about wet markets? There's some lobbying that goes on the wet market side, and I think you probably mean by wet markets in China. The wet markets in China, there's only so much we can do about it except lobby and help with surveillance in those markets. That's one of the programs I was working on was from the U.S. government. In Wuhan, and looking at the wet markets there and looking for diseases like this as they emerged in Wuhan and Guangzhou in southern China. When will the antibody test be available at LabCorp or Quest? I'm not quite sure. I think it just got approval this last week, so it's going to take quite a bit of time to scale that up and get it out to the rest of the country. So don't expect it anytime very soon. And the antibody test, just to let you know, is to tell you if you had COVID-19, not to tell you if you have it. And if you had it, it'll tell you, kind of where you are in the recovery. Are you just recovering, or are you more than 4 to 6 weeks away from recovering? And the reason that's important is to tell you if you're immune. If you're 4 to 6 weeks out, then you probably are immune. And you can also donate your plasma and help people in the treatment of COVID-19 through what we call convalescent plasma, so people that have recovered. Will this ever go away so our lives go back to normal? It will eventually go away, but it is going to take some time. And, I think eventually we're all going to come to know this as, life pre-COVID-19 and life post-COVID-19. I've had a few events like that in my life. Hurricane Katrina was one, and then going through Ebola in 2014 and 15 was another. That just completely changed my life, and it was like before it happened and thinking about everything beforehand, it was really the good old days, and then afterwards it was just the new life that I had to accept after that. And so I think that's a nationwide and even a worldwide thing for COVID-19. We're all going to remember kind of where we were and where we rode out COVID-19 and what it was like to go through it, and I'm sure many books and everything else will be written about this experience, just because globally it's just having a massive impact on the human species. And this is not even the most deadly pandemic that we could have experienced. In fact, we expected a much more deadly one than this, but it's still very bad. So you can imagine that what the next one will look like, and these are only increasing in frequency. That being said, I've got 1 minute left, and I'll try to answer one more question. what about a meat shortage? So I did read about some of the meat shortage and the food supply chain. That's kind of a concern everywhere. Food supply chain is a concern everywhere. Everything from the restaurants and bars that would normally serve food not needing it, and the farms just not having a way to get that food to say food banks that desperately need it right now. So I saw some reporting on that this morning, just about them having to actually throw away perfectly good, at least vegetables. And then, what you're talking about with the meat shortage, with workers that are infected with coronavirus, those workers, obviously can't come to work if they're infected with COVID-19. And so it's breaking down kind of the supply chain for meat, which will lead to higher prices, of course. So that's what happens when we really commercialize all of our markets, and we depend on mega factories for food. If something goes wrong in those factories, then of course it's going to be a lot more expensive for us to get that food, and not as easy for us to get it. So that's going to be it for today. I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime. Thanks. Bye-bye.